Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And I'm, going to continue in a dystopian bent, so I apologize. I guess I should kind of speak to the different perspectives I bring to the theme of sort of merging or seeing the ways in which science and art can inform each other, can talk to each other. And so I thought I'd sort of talk about the different kinds of projects I'm involved in, and then offer some theses or provocations on the question of how science fiction relates to its time. And I don't know if I believe these, but I'm going to put them out there, and we can talk about them and see if they're see just how wrong they are. So as Kevin said, I'm an English professor at the University of Maryland, and I've taught a variety of classes on science fiction. I study science fiction. I've taught classes on sort of global science fiction, and that is to say science fiction from a variety of different countries, also science fiction that tries to think globally, think about the interconnections between people. I've taught courses on questions of the post-human and the way that science fiction can be paired productively with philosophy, political writing, journalism, in thinking about the ways that the human is transforming. And so, the other talks, I think, have sort of spoken very eloquently to the nature of those transformations. In my fiction, I've written one novel, or I've published one novel. I've written another that isn't out yet. And my book is a near future dystopian satire called Pop Apocalypse, and it's about sort of a version of the world in which video search is very highly developed, and this leads to a variety of developments. And sort of the thought behind it was that many dystopian futures imagine that what you would do with video search is create a surveillance state. We would be watching each other, or the government would be watching us and trying to control our actions, trying to oppress us in various ways. And I guess what I wanted to do was think about the way that video search would sort of maybe begin in a military context, but then very quickly take over celebrity culture. And so the book is actually about the development of a celebrity stock market based on this video search technology. And so there are various horrible, terrible things that come out of that. And so I've kind of taken a pretty negative view of the future, and I think this is something I want to talk a little bit about. I'm going to try to be brief in my comments, but those are sort of two of the contexts I'm bringing here. The third context is actually also in relation to ASU, and also in relation to this Project Hieroglyph initiative that Neil Stevenson is working on. Was sort of recruited by Ed Finn to try to imagine a positive future. It turns out to be very difficult indeed for various reasons. But it's got me thinking a lot about the question of the function of science fiction. What does it do for us in the present? How does it help us think about the kinds of futures we want to build? And I want to maybe talk a little bit about what is a hieroglyph in Project Hieroglyph. And Stevenson drew that term from Microsoft researcher Jim Karkanias. And what Karkanias was talking about was the kind of iconic golden age science fiction of writers like Asimov and Heinlein, even more recent writers who are typically thought to be dystopian, like William Gibson. And a hieroglyph, by his definition, is a simple or recognizable symbol whose significance everyone seems to agree on, and that can form a kind of organizing principle around which a variety of projects can emerge. So things like rocket flight or robotics or cyberspace are, for Karkanias, types of hieroglyph. And so, I've been sort of working on this and thinking about this, and it's sort of led me maybe in a direction that is different from what Joel was talking about in his talk. And in a way, I've participated in this project, and I think it's really fantastic, but I'm also finding myself resisting it in certain ways. And there are three kind of axes of resistance here. So the first proposition that I want to put out there is the idea that science fiction is always, in a certain sense, out of joint with the time that it's written. And this, I think, is a thesis that I came to just from my experience publishing my novel. And another way to put it is to say that the world is really fast, but the publishing industry is really slow. So I started writing my book in 2005. I had the idea, the genesis of the idea in 2005. And, I had a very kind of a vague sense of what I wanted to do at that point. Like the summer, I've tried to reconstruct it for this talk, somewhere around the summer of 2005. I did my first draft, I completed my first draft by the fall of 2006. It took a year to revise it and was very, very lucky and sold it in September of 2007. And then it actually came out in May of 2009. So that's a total of 4 years between the time of conception and the time of publication. And why is that important? Well, I would rather that time be shorter for personal reasons, but it's also interesting because, I conceived of the book as a kind of critique of things that I saw going on around me in the world. So I was, the apocalypse there is not metaphorical. I was, very, very sort of attuned to the political problem of the Iraq War and had various reactions to it that I wanted to send up, satirize. I was very interested in evangelical, right-wing Christian culture, and I wanted to talk about that in a fictional form. But of course, between 2005 and 2009, the world was very, very different. So the target of the satire radically transformed in the 4 years that it took to publish the book. Public opinion turned against the war. Obama was elected. Lots of people who formerly sort of supported certain policies decided they didn't like them anymore for various reasons. So as far as timely critique, science fiction is always going to be out of joint with the time that it's written in. Another dimension, that, is out of joint is the technological and scientific speculation that went into the book. So, I thought I was, being very clever by having characters in this near future world carry tablet computers. And in 2005, this was a very clever thing. And, the iPad came out in April of 2010. So I had 11 months of foresight and innovation that I could, sort of be very proud of. And I could tell people who were talking about the iPad, no, I predicted that. I saw that. Wasn't the only one, I guess. So that's sort of a second way in which science fiction is out of joint. It's always making mistakes. It's always getting things wrong. Its forecasts are always missing the mark. So the idea, and this is my second sort of proposal. The idea that science fiction is about the future is very, very problematic. And a lot of really smart science fiction writers sort of resist this idea. So the second thesis is that science fiction is always about the present. And so what I mean is that at the same time that I sort of had all my, what I thought, were clever ideas about, near future technologies, the political problems that were leading us in apocalyptic, in my view, directions, lots of other writers had the same ideas at the same time. So what you can learn from science fiction is what people of a certain moment most care about. And so in my role as a scholar, I, view science fiction this way. What's interesting about reading Isaac Asimov now is not that, he predicts all sorts of interesting, wonderful things, but that, the characters in his books don't have cell phones, they smoke, they do things that really mark his writing as of its moment. And this is what's, I think for me very exciting and really interesting about studying science fiction. It gives you such insight into the moment in which it's written. A writer like Cory Doctorow has argued that science fiction is a genre that gives evidence of what he calls radical presentism. And he says, and this is a quote, science fiction is a literature that uses the device of futurism to show up the present, a time that is difficult enough to get a handle on. So what science fiction is, in a sense, doing is giving us predictions about the present. We don't, understand a fraction of what goes on around us. And the functions that seem traditionally associated with futurism have, great use in just, understanding how, I get through my day. I have my iPad now. I don't know how it works. It comes to me from China somewhere. How can I better grasp that? And so, a lot of writers, Stevenson is one, William Gibson is another, are more and more writing science fiction worlds that are actually set in the present. So Gibson's book, Pattern Recognition, Spook Country, Zero History, they're all set, in the 2000s, but they feel like cyberpunk novels. So that's the sort of the second claim I want to make. And the third claim, just to be really quick and finish up, is to say that science fiction does not stop being interesting because of this. It still has a kind of vital role to play. It still has a function to play, and that's why I'm excited about this project, this thing that's going on at ASU, and I think it's useful because it helps us resist the tendency to try to show broken worlds or to show the world going wrong in various ways. So science fiction is really good at showing how the present is broken, how things are going wrong. And I think, it's it's a very, sort of important point that Stevenson makes, that, we want to try to find a way to recapture a certain kind of optimism that the genre used to have. And for Stevenson, I think, that's really tied up in his memory of the space program. And so when he describes this project, he really talks about moonshot ideas, right? Ideas that are big collective projects that we can all sign up for, all participate in, all feel good. You presumably feel good when one of these moonshot projects is accomplished, even though you may have no material, involvement in its generation and fulfillment. So that's I think the suggestion that Stevenson is giving us. And I might sort of take it away from thinking about technology as such and thinking more about the institutions and political worlds and forms of regulation and other kinds of institutions that we want to build in order to make us feel better about the present. And I think science fiction can play a really important role in making that happen. So those are provocations. I invite disagreements, angry or not, and we can talk about this in the group. Thank you.